great to have you on, Dave. And look, I was really excited for this chat, right? Like, you were doing platform engineering and SRE before it became mainstream and cool at Google, and you've kind of seen all the trends, thereafter, right? So I think probably the most pertinent place to start is like when we look at platform engineering and SRE, like they seem to inherit all the decisions from the earlier phases of software development, right?
Yeah.
When we just like apply AI to everything now, right? How do you think that world is changing? And do you think that there has to be fundamental shifts in platform engineering and SRE to keep up with AI code generation and what developers are doing?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, right? The capability is changing. People are getting a lot more capable, and teams are getting a lot more capable, and that's a mixed bag, right? So that includes platform teams and sort of reliability teams or operational teams, depending on where you're at and how they're formed, right? There's a lot of what operationally focused teams used to do or are still doing, but are don't really need to be doing anymore. Like I often said that, if you have an operationally focused team and people are opening tickets or opening sort of, requests, they either want your access or your expertise, right? And, the access thing can be sorted, but the expertise thing, and often the expertise was in like obscure configuration languages or obscure pieces of knowledge that have been sort of democratized by, I can just ask. There's a certain YAML dialect, or there's like PromQL, or there's some sort of thing that most people have really no business having in their L1 cache that, you can just kind of do it yourself a little bit. And again, there's a double-edged sword to that capability as well. So for the most part, a lot of teams either aren't or don't need to be in that mode of operation where it's like, we know things that most people don't or shouldn't. And people need to ask us to do that thing for them, right? I mean, on the con, there's a lot more code being written. Code is problems, as we know, right? And in a lot of cases, and I'll probably keep coming back to this as a notion, right? But like, there's a lot more capability that's unmatched with intent, right? That people are able to write code to do things and haven't really sat down and thought about, well, should we, right? And is this a good idea? Is this what our company does, right? And we're in a sort of a gold rush with that at the moment. And operational teams, are sort of and reliability teams, whatever you want to call them, are sort of bearing the brunt of that at the moment, right? It was well put, right? They're dealing with the tail end or the output end of a lot of decisions that are being made.
Do you think heuristics, right, is and was a really big part of being a good developer, right, or a good engineer in general, right?
Yeah.
Do you think we're losing that?
I think it's becoming more crucial. When you say heuristics now, what?
I mean, like the mental models that we used to hold in our head, and like being able to shortcut and use more judgment.
I think they're becoming more crucial. I think that to an extent has always been what being a good engineer has been about, right? Do you have the capability to sort of look at a problem and engineerify it, right? Look at it and break it down into its component parts and have a good solid opinion on how to solve it and do that sort of thing. Like in some respects, and I'm going to start a holy war here, right? Being able to translate that intent into capability has always been the kind of boring part, even though people, engineers have often come to me over the years and said, like, I wish I was writing more code. And I'm like, are you? Okay, cool. That's a good way of releasing endorphins. But
yeah.
The really interesting parts about being an engineer is being able to have captured in your head the notions that form good software engineering, be they, as you say, the heuristics, the translating, requirements into intent, and also just the T-shaped skills of being able to sort of talk to others and manage stakeholders and all that good stuff. Like, especially as engineers get more senior, right? That's how you get more seniors. You get good at those parts. So if anything, you know, with COVID and with you know, AI as it came out, like that's the sort of part that gives me the willies more broadly, right? Is that people need to be getting better at that. That'll become a more crucial skill, but I don't know how they're going to do that, because a lot of the sort of technology and capability and things that have happened are sort of disabusing people of the responsibility to do that, right? Same with COVID, when everyone's suddenly working from home, and I'm like, how do people become senior engineers when you don't have to go through this sort of the slog of what the previous generation did? Like, how do we instill that in people when they have technology and you know what's happening with their work situation working against that to an extent?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. Like the T-shaped skills.
Mm.
You, um, junior engineers sometimes come to me and like they say, okay, well, to your point, right? I want to write more code. I want to be the best in Java, Spring, or Kotlin. And like, why?
Yeah,
Why? Like, like there's a certain plateau that you get to if you want to become a staff engineer. It's less about the code itself. It's more about the architecture and how you
yeah,
talk about the architecture cross-functionally and take complex things in nuts and bolts and bring it up to higher level
yeah,
management who
yeah.
are making decisions.
Yeah, there's room for people who are, that's the thing that they're good at, right? And
Yeah.
especially early career folks where it's like, I am the best at X, at technology X. Like, absolutely room for people in that sense. But like, if you have somebody who is, you know, more senior in their career and all that sort of stuff, it's people who have the other capabilities, the sort of staff level engineer capabilities that really distinguish themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that when COVID came around, it was definitely a like, how are we as an industry going to not have ourselves, you know, generate a generation of cave dwellers, right? Where they don't understand, you know, when you take in interns, and I used to take in interns at Google like by the dozen, right? And it's like, I'm not interested in the work that you're doing, right? You know, the work that you're doing will mostly be thrown away. Maybe I didn't actually tell them that, but like what I'm interested in is teaching you how the workplace works, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's kind of what it turned into.
Yeah. Especially in a complex place like Google, right? Which is more of a society than a company at times.
Sure.
Um, and right, we one thing that I'm still unsure where the industry is going is in terms of security, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm guilty of this myself. I just like accept everything that Cursor or Claude gives me, which is like I must install this npm packet. Okay, yeah, thumbs
Yeah,
up, right? And the occasional time where I go and investigate that npm packet, I see that it's like one solo person contributing to it. I'm like,
right.
where are they based, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think we had a conversation a few weeks ago about like the supply chain.
Mm.
And you mentioned that that was something that was big on your radar
Yeah.
and something that you were trying to figure out. Like, can you speak to that and like how AI is shaping that in your mind?
Yeah, what's funny is that the word trust comes up when people are talking about this. Is like, do we trust the agent to do the right thing, etc. And I think as a software traditionalist, to the extent that you can be a software traditionalist, is like, it's not a question of trust. Like, there's no human that you are trusting. There's no other human in the loop. What people are kind of doing is just sort of disabusing themselves of the responsibility to verify, right? You know, they're sort of going like, well, I'm just going to trust that all of this stuff is fine. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, you're not trusting anyone aside from, you know, chaos a little bit, right? But yeah, like the supply chain thing, this has been getting, you know, coming to a head, and it's certainly on my radar in terms of obviously the big ticket stuff was, or some of the big ticket stuff was back in April with the sort of light LLM and Trivi sort of vulnerabilities that made the news cycle, right? And that sort of stuff has stopped making the news cycle, even though it has kept on happening, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
major parts are like, scale is always the thing, and in terms of scale as a sort of a threat vector, that the main parts that have changed is just how fast things go, right? If you go read I'm not sure which one was the light LLM or it was the Trivi one, that like people went in and did their incident response and were changing, like rotating keys, and you know, the attacker got in while they were doing their key rotation, right? The attacker was able to act in minutes rather than hours, right? And so what that really signaled was your current, your current method of trusting software isn't going to work anymore. And when you do get popped, your method for doing, for incident response also isn't going to work anymore, right? And so there's definitely an element of, oh, this is a step change in what we need as a capability, right? And I'm hoping a lot of places are really starting to think about like, okay, how can we potentially outsource this? Because whenever I'm making the sort of build versus buy kind of decision on some of this stuff, is that like, is this the kind of thing that every single company needs to be good at? To which my answer is like, I hope not. You go when you think about like the likes of Chain Guard or like the local lads, Cloudsmith, or some of those places where you're able to have that capability, or you're able to buy that capability to really stay on top of your single bill of materials and your supply chain and all that sort of stuff. Because the thing with Light LLM, and like my personal exposure to Light LLM, was like through like three different transitive dependencies down into the stack. Like nobody was using it directly, but it was just like pulled in as part of a random provider, etc. And like you can stay on top of that. Right? And that acknowledgement needs to be there.
Yeah. Now, you did mention in your article, and I really enjoyed the one where it was like chasing boring at the right speed, right? Where it's like MTTR is something that a lot of vendors have made money on, right? But it might not actually translate into today's world, right? Like, so, how are you thinking about like learning from incidents and operationalizing that and hard coding that knowledge into engineering, but also to the agents these days?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a gold rush at the moment in terms of, what can we throw agents at to reduce, right? And MTTR, to my mind, is one of the least interesting things you can try and drive down, right? Because it kind of ignores the fact that like ignores the number of leaks in your bucket in favor of being able to plug them quicker, right? And what we've established is that like, when you have sort of agentically built things, right, they'll continue to break in fairly boring ways, right? Most of the ways in which software fails are pretty boring and pretty repetitive, right? So when I think of MTTR, I'm like, okay, sure, look after it to an extent. Like if you're having constant 4-hour outages, that's probably not great. Maybe there's something wrong with your practice. But for the most part, what you're looking at is two things, I guess, is like mean time between failure, right? That's a little bit more interesting. And also in incident management practice, what you're really looking at and why you put yourself through the method of doing retrospectives or postmortems or whatever you want to call them is, how can we stop this happening again? What systemic change can we make in order to make it so that this doesn't happen again, right? And again, we come up with an intent and we use all this wonderful capability we've bought, to really push things in that direction, right? And that to my mind is the core of reliability, right? Is leveling more of our intent towards, making it so that things don't break in boring ways, that they break in novel ways. And that's why we do postmortems. Is like, how can we stop this from ever happening again, right? And how do we do that in a systemic way rather than and it's one of my common bugbears. I should have a sign I just put hold up in postmortem meetings where people bring up like, well, we can just get everyone to not do that. And I'm like, no, that doesn't, like, humans don't work that way. Like humans will continue to do that, and also the set of humans that are exposed to this system is not constant. People will leave and people will keep on joining, and they'll make the same boring ass mistakes as the existing ones, right?
Yeah. But so in my experience, right, like it's as you said, right? It's like the transient of your organization, people moving, the attrition, like knowledge leaves or moves, shifts elsewhere, right? Like, do you see a world where those incidents can be hard coded somewhere, right? That just keeps, like, because with their agents, right? Like we can maybe hard code it in an agent memory or a knowledge layer somewhere, right? That can help the engineer absorb it more, right? Because like there's so much cognitive overload on a daily basis in
Yeah.
engineering for an individual developer that they're going to miss those things, right? Like just because it pops up in Instant.io or Slack doesn't mean your developers all over it, right? It just means it needs to like surface in the moment for them.
Yeah, and we've no shortage of signals, right? So
Yeah.
there's signals everywhere constantly bombarding us with like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And this applies
Mm.
to like security, reliability, all of the vectors along which software is kind of developed, right? And that to me, again, coming back to my soapbox here, is like that's capability. That's like we've got amazing levels of capability. We have tools like depth first, where you're able to just sort of point it at your code base and say like find all the security bugs and CVEs, and you're like, fantastic, here's like 900 PRs, right? And it's like, okay, that's great, that's amazing. Doesn't mean we should though, right?
Mm.
It's like there's always a trade-off, there's always a sort of a capability gap. And I draw the parallel with SLOs, for example, right? Is that if you go ask your average CEO, CTO, like what's the right SLAs or SLOs for your service, and they're like 100% all the time, right? Especially if there's been an outage recently, right? It's like 100% all the time. Brilliant. Care a lot about this, right? And then you sort of go and say like, well, what about security? What about like the number of CVEs that are extant in your system at any given time? And they're like, no, zero CVEs. Like aim for 100%, right? And at a certain point, you kind of have to acknowledge like there's a degree of how much you care about all of these different vectors, like security, reliability, customer satisfaction, even like you could throw in there all that sort of stuff, where it's like they can't all be 100%.
Yeah.
Right. You have to, as a company, have a thing instilled within your either company culture or your founders sort of notions of like how much they care about all of these things, and they can't all be full on turned to 11, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
that's
risk management.
yeah, exactly, and that's the interesting part, right? And so a lot of systems are designed for, if you take a system that's supposed to work on your MTTR or even MTBF, right? It's like that is going to single-mindedly drive down those metrics. And it's like, okay, is that unequivocally always the thing that you want to drive down? No. There's still going to be a human judgment in the loop, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And increasingly, a lot of these products that you buy, they're designed for one thing. So you've bought a nice shiny set of hammers, right? And you have to decide which one to use today, right? And that's and like at the end of the day, we want to get to a point where people haven't disabused themselves of the responsibility to decide which hammer to use on any
Yeah. Yeah. I always found it irritating where you'd have an executive that, obviously you've been wined and dined by a certain vendor and comes in and says, okay, we're doing this. This is gonna like be the game changer for us, and la. And like they miss the whole compound interest of stuff, right? Like doing good things better more times, more frequently is better than that one big bet, right? And it's just like how you compound. Are you compounding up or down, right? And I just think that we've kind of been like that with AI code generation a small bit, right? Where it's like been shiny new thing. This is going to change our world forever. And they've ignored all the compound things that actually make this tool more effective.
Yeah, what you're doing is you're adding to your capability for generating code, which is great.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's a big hammer you've bought. It doesn't make you Thor, right?
It's one of those automatic hammers that tilt the head automatically, right?
It's
and you just hold it.
It gives you such capability, and the thing is, what like companies at their fundament are made of intent. Like they're made of humans who want to do a particular thing and have to then rein themselves in. And I see a lot of places, for better or worse. Like I talk to a lot of software vendors these days, and sometimes a software vendor will come back to you, 6 months after you last spoke to them, and say, we've actually changed fundamentally what it is that we do. And I'm like, that's good. Is it good? Like, you're closer to what I kind of would theoretically buy now, but I don't know if you're going to stay that way, right? Because
Yeah.
you know, you've bought into the machine that allows you to see a squirrel and go off and chase that squirrel and change yourself into a different kind of company, right? And so, more boring companies, please, that will stay doing the same thing for more than 6 to 12 months. That would be good.
It's easier said than done. When you've investors chasing you, it's always always a different kettle of fish, as they say.
Do the thing that will sell right now, and that's like I'll draw the parallel between what's happening now and I'll age myself here. Like I was just about around for the first .com boom around like the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And we're in that gold rush phase at the moment. We're in the pets.com phase at the moment, like where people are getting handed giant chunks of money to, you know, see what sticks, right? You know, and so it's an interesting time for sure, you know, but we will reach a reckoning at some point where it's like, okay, the thing you're building has to be like useful at a foundational level, right? As opposed to chasing a certain thing and seeing if it sticks.
Yeah. Like you have to run towards the fire, I think, in this market at times, right? Instead of the easy route. I think, you know, a corner, for example, there was a lot of easy routes we could have taken, but we decided to do probably one of the most hardest things because we said, okay, if we can solve that, it's a challenge worth solving, and it's going to be there. Even if AI doesn't be this awesome, awe-inspiring thing, and we go back to hand rolling code, it's still going to be around. And that was our theory: is that run towards the fire instead of you know, the extinguishers.
If you look at the again the historic parallel, right, of like you look at post crash, you know, .com boom, right, is that the stuff that rose from the ashes there is the stuff that was sort of fundamentally more useful to humans, right?
Yeah,
fundamentally more useful to, because at the end of the day, the robots work for us, right? Or that's the theory, right? You know, the likes of Google and etc. came out where it's like, oh, what's the earth-shattering thing that you're going to do? It's like, we're going to make it easy to find things on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And people are like, amazing, please do that. Like, I'm not going to buy all of my gear. Like, I'm not going to buy everything on the internet yet because like it's 2001, seriously, right? You know, but let me find things, show me a little ad, sure. Right, you know, I'm looking forward to that phase.
Well, I mean, like people have money, all right? Yeah. Robots don't have money, right? It's like, and when Dario last year came out and said that, well, or was it this year actually, even Davos, and he said like, this year, Claude is going to write all of your code for your engineers, and I was like, sure. Okay. And and a lot of people, I think, were sharpening their sword for the day of reckoning, because I think everyone kind of understood that there's going to be a plateau, right, somewhere of like, we're going to figure this out. It's not going to be 100%. It's not going to be 0%.
It wasn't Dario, but there was another Anthropic chap the other day who came out and said like loops are the thing now, like where you just like point an agent repeatedly at a problem, and I'm like, oh, like a person whose literal actual day job it is to sell us more tokens says that like running the agent over. They're like, seriously.
Yeah, exactly. They're good at marketing. I'll give them that. They're very good at marketing. You know, and there was an article I read recently, and it changed my perspective on things, right? Because it helped me understand the inner mechanics, because I didn't explore the inner mechanics of LLMs, right? But it talked about, you know, forward feedback networking, headed architecture, and all that. And it made a point that the frontier labs aren't as actually different as we think, right? The underlying encoding, the weights, the model sets, and all that isn't actually massively different. And it's just a market on top of it that's like consuming this value, right? Like there is a bit of differentiation, don't get me wrong, right? And there's good branding. I think developers absorb Claude before they absorb Codex, but
sure,
I think
there's also an element of like right now we're in the like all things to all people phase. Like okay, I'm using Claude to write code, but like Claude also has like all of Wikipedia and a bunch of recipes in there, right? You know, there's an element of like, where's the agent that's just good at writing code, right?
Yes,
that maybe costs a little less, you know, and there's where we're at, right?
And Harvey, I think Harvey, I'm just getting up the stats here, right? Harvey went off and they're testing on GLM, an open source model,
Mm.
and they found it more accurate and less costly, right? So compared to Opus, it was like $954 per task, with GLM 5.1 with their own open weight data set, $121.
And the thing is, going back to the SLO and SLA and maximalist thing from a second ago, right? It doesn't actually have to be better, right? That's what it comes down to. Like,
Yeah, it's whatever your business. Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
so like if you look at, I think one of the big kerfuffles recently was the Copilot pricing changes, where they're like, okay, we're going to charge you per was it Copilot? We're going to charge you per token rather than just a flat fee, and these are the different model multipliers.
That's right.
Tokens, right? So if you look at Haiku versus Opus, right, it's like 5x price difference, right? Which is bananas, like for different versions of software, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's not a question of like, is it better for cheaper? It's more the question of like, is it good enough for cheaper?
Yeah.
Because one thing I do spot is that a lot of companies are sort of going, oh, now we need to rationalize our AI spend because we've gone through our own personal gold rush phase where it's like, let's just give everyone unlimited Claude, enterprise access. And then they give everyone unlimited Claude enterprise access. And then they look at it a month later and go, let's not. Let's figure something else out. Right?
It's when the CFO comes into the room and says, okay, we're spending 5 million a week on tokens. What am I getting? What are we getting as a business?
What's the outcome, right? Is that like, oh, we can write a lot more code a lot more quickly. And, a sensible person would look at that and say, like, is that good? Is that what we want? Right.
Yeah.
And like, because again, it's down to like, are we delivering product at the rate we want to? Is it good product? Is it better than it was previously? And if, and are we sure, right? That the customer satisfaction metrics and other metrics we're coming up with are actually not made up, right? So.
And there's a lot, there's a lot of things you can do to reduce tokens, right? Like, I see a lot of senior engineers developing their own skills, developing their own readmes, developing their own Obsidian knowledge bases, so that the LLM isn't pulling from the same grep file and grepping their code base time after time. But when I go to maybe less engineers and maybe there's a symptom here, and it might be controversial, where when you bring in like Accenture or the Big Four or outsourcing agencies to develop, their incentive is to do it fast, right? And within contract, they're not incentivized to reduce token spend. That's not their forte, right? And they're just like cranking out people who are transient.
Right.
Sorry?
Fundamentally, when you bring in external consultancies or managed service partners, they aim for done, not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. AI makes that a lot easier, right? For is that like, is it done? Yep. Right. Does it introduce mountains of technical debt? I don't understand the question. Right. Same as it ever was, right? And it just makes it easier to get it done.
Yeah. I can't wait for that to play out. Actually, that's a Netflix drama right there. I think. Right there.
Yeah.
Switching gears, Dave. Right. So a lot of our listeners are like staff engineers, head of engineering, VPs of engineering, CTOs, right? And some of them are at the early stages of, I'm trying to convince my developers to use these tools, right? Just to trust them a bit more and like start exploring with them. And there are some people on that phase now where they've kind of gone through the trough of enlightenment, and they're now kind of like looking at this in terms of, okay, how do we make it more sustainable from tokens, from a systematic approach, and like make this tool more sustainable beyond the next shock of here's a new model, right? So, can you speak to like your experience, maybe as Astronomer or before that, of how you helped your engineers adopt these tools, and then kind of like how do you see it scaling thereafter and make it more like sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, tool adoption and selling people on a particular thing is hasn't changed massively. It's a very sort of a human process, right? You have to an extent, and I hesitated earlier in using the word trust when applied to these kinds of things. This implies like trusting another person and there's no other person involved. But you have to, there is a sales job to be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of cases, I'll draw the parallel with like a lot of platform engineering, right? Where if you build a platform, if you build a wonderful platform where you get your observability for free, or you get your sort of frameworks for doing particular things for free, you still have to sell that platform. It doesn't sell itself. You have to go out and say, hey, I'm telling you, individual team or individual exec or whoever it is, here's what you get for free. Here's why this is better than doing it yourself, all of that sort of thing. And that's a straightforward sales job when you're doing it for platforms, in that like there's already buy-in, unequivocal buy-in, like it's always going to be better to use this particular platform for this particular method, right? The sales job here is ever so slightly different, right? In a general case, we're like, okay, you should take advantage of this technology. We can't sleep on this, right? There's an element of like you have to use it to an extent, but you have to be nuanced about what parts of your strategy you disabuse yourself of in order to take advantage of this sort of technology, right? And that nuance is lost on many folks, right? And so what I've what I've found is that you start with an unequivocal, animal brain sort of like, what do I get kind of thing, right? In some cases it can be, let's pick something that is easy and that is not high value and start there, right? In the SRE world, they call it toil, right? Which is, high, potentially high outcome, but like low human value work, right? I referred right back at the start of this to like, okay, maybe there is like a particular framework for configuration or code where, and I'm mostly trolling when I say like nobody has any business understanding how to write like, end-to-end tests for each individual endpoint in an API, for example, right? Like, I think we're at a point where that's somewhere where we're all comfortable sort of, putting unchecked capability in play, right? It's not terribly complex. It's not particularly good. And you start there, right? I think going straight to the like, hi, let me introduce you to this computer program that will replace you, is not going to land well, even with the most pilled of AI people, right? But getting to the point where it's like, okay, within certain sort of intent-based guardrails, if you were to go out to a team and say, nobody has any business understanding how our monitoring configuration works anymore, right? That's not a skill we value anymore, right? And that's not amazing if you're the monitoring guru, right? If you're the monitoring guru, you should probably get ahead of that, and say like, okay, here's where I add value outside of having a configuration language in my L1 cache, right? Or my personal brain L1 cache, right? And for the most part, people are, they do have the capability behind that, the intent behind that, rather than just being a person who knows a configuration language. I think those people are pretty rare. But the sales job, and it is a sales job, is moving in ever increasing circles after that and saying, okay, now we've done away with the thing that we can unequivocally agree that nobody wants to do day to day. What else makes sense for us to, separate from ourselves and not fundamentally do, right? And it's why I sort of you always sort of look askance at some of the news headlines that like, AI is going to replace software engineers, and it's going to replace these people and that people. And I'm just like, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Like, it's going to replace some of the boring parts of our job, right? Parts of our job where it's not really useful for a human to be doing this, right? Where if somebody's going to have a counter argument for me, and they're going to say like, no, we always need to hand roll all of our configuration because reason, I'm like, that's probably a stupid reason, right? Or that's probably not an amazing reason, right? So that's and I think it's okay to spend a little time figuring that out, because that's like the appetite for how much we want to outsource is going to vary by company, and it's going to vary by team, right? If you have if you have a team that's doing code for like, you know, a frontier kind of product, right? Sure, you know, you want a ton of capability and you want to level that your execution, and you want to be able to do that. If you're building ASICs, right? If you're building like low level stuff, or you know, if you're building a database, right? You know, like maybe you want to be a little bit more careful.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it does vary massively by team, I think.
What about I had an engineering manager on, and he said to his team, "Hey, we've got more time now to talk about product, and we've got more time to jump on calls." He said that within a week, most of these engineers were complaining about the calls and talking about product, and they wanted to get back to the coding, right? So there is this displacement of time and where you use it, right? Like, and again, I'm amazed that like what the stat is, 20% of engineers' time is spent, was spent actually coding.
Yeah.
Right. To me, that's just been, and the nature of engineers, right? Like we just want to build, right?
Mhm.
So we're still using 20% of our time, but it's not coding one thing. It's like we have 10 different sessions opening
Yeah.
and doing a lot of things, right? So like you talk about intent, right? And like, yes, there's things that we need that AI can do, and there's things that we just shouldn't do with AI, right? Or whatever. It's just wasting our time in terms of maintenance and all that. Like, so how do you operationalize this intent as we kind of try to then move to the staff, the group of people who want to like make AI more sustainable, right?
Mhm.
Which means that like your engineers shouldn't maybe be opening up 15 different sessions at one time, because like that's just cognitive overload 101 right there.
Yeah. I mean, the human brain wants to spend a certain amount of wall clock time doing a particular thing, right? And so, you know, writing code, even though it was 20% of your time, it represented a sort of a wide open, I'm trying to do this thing. It's going to take like a day. It's going to take like 2 days. And there is sometimes peace in that, right? You know, you're okay, I'm in the process of doing a thing. When you sort of say, okay, now that's going to take like 5 minutes so you can hop on this call, it's very, very unsatisfactory. Like it's not an amazing outcome. Like it's an amazing outcome from the point of view of like pure you know, output, but it's not satisfactory from the point of view of the programmer. And I think we haven't fully grasped how we fill in that gap, that sort of human need to spend more than 5 minutes thinking about a thing at any given time. Like we're in a gold rush, and but by the gold rush, I mean that like people are just like, grab that shovel, dig there. Okay, that doesn't work, dig there. And that's very unsatisfactory for somebody who's like an artisan miner, right? You know, he's trying to get to a point where, can I spend like more than a few minutes thinking about a thing before we say done and move on? Right.
Yeah.
And that I think is at the fundament of a lot of the dissatisfaction that you see around this. Is that it's not that I think that this thing is going to replace me, right? You know, there's still going to be products to be built, and there's still going to be software engineering to be done in the broader sense. But like the unsatisfactory part is that it's not so much that like I want to sit there and take a lot longer to write code. It's more that like I want to spend more time thinking about a single problem.
But it's the danger of the illusion AI gives you, right? Like it, you know, it, even our engineers at Corner, right? Like, you know, we look at problems, and there's off the shelf tools you can buy that are inexpensive, and our engineers will say, "Oh, we can build that." Right? It's like, sure, you can, right? You can build anything, right? It's just like that discipline of no, I think is a non-work, and understanding what non-work is going to be really, really important. And it's probably your job as an engineering leader to instill that and hardcore that operationalize that intent of like, okay, maybe before you open a session, these are the questions you should ask yourself, just to kind of do a little mental check, right?
Yeah. Like I know I can, but should I?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
That's the sort of phrase sort of at the core of this whole conversation, right? Is that you know, you have people at all levels of the organization right now having to answer that question, right? Whereas previously, at the previous sort of pace of operations, you would have company leadership, right? You know, it's like, okay, we're an observability company. Should we be building our own job scheduler for the other underlying thing, right?
Mm.
Previously, you'd have a little while to think about that, right? And you'd probably come to the conclusion that no, that's a stupid idea, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas now it's like somebody's built a prototype. What are we going to do? This looks really exciting. Everyone's really excited about it, and it kind of it
Works on my machine.
It forces leadership often to show up and say,
Yeah,
stop that.
Yeah.
We're not a job scheduling, or we're not a whatever squirrel you've chased this week company.
Yeah.
We have to sort of stay on path. We have to build a product that we're building, and we have to get better at doing that. And if that's suddenly boring, then what are we filling in the gaps in our intent with?
Yeah, it's like there's a deep human psychology kind of tangent here to it, right? Is like, you become a developer because you enjoy building and you enjoy the process of coding. And that's been replaced by not just doing one thing, but multiple things. And that's giving you kind of the same buzz and dopamine hit, right? And like a lot of engineers will chase that dopamine hit, right? And it's just like trying to.
Yeah, I had a paper. It turned into a chapter in the SRE book. Sneaky plug, but like this was a couple of years ago, which is essentially like humans are bad machines, right? They're not good at context switches. They're not good at figuring out, But on the other hand, cognitive flow state can be gained from doing lots of tiny little things, right? All over the place. You can sort of say, I'm fixing a bunch of problems, right? And all of these problems are getting fixed, and then I can move on, and this is great. And it's the same kind of cognitive flow state you get from sitting down and working on a long problem that requires a bunch of state in your mind, right? And I think we're getting to the point where like there's a whole lot of the first kind of cognitive flow state, but like it needs to be directed in a certain way.
Yeah.
And right now we're asking people to be really, really good at context switches. And the thing is, like, humans are no different than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We're just asking different things of them now, and some of those things are very, very unsatisfactory, right? Like this is not a good use of my talents as a thing. Like we're at the end of the day, we're all still scared monkeys that taught sand how to think, right? And that hasn't changed in the last 5 years, right?
It's so interesting. And like developer experience. I had Max on from Capital One, who's head of developer experience, and he was talking about the same thing as like the illusion of work done, the false pretenses, the chasing of that gold, and it gives you that initial enlightenment, but then when you don't get it, or when you hear a no, it just like undermines everything that you've done, right? And you can have a really sucky day after that, right? And you go back to it the following day and you suck from the hose again, and you want things to change. So that'd be interesting. Final question, right? We're about time, Dave, right? Like, and look, AI can be seen like, and you probably saw this, right, going through the dot-com bubble, right, of like inertia of bullshit spewing out around the place, right, and everyone plugging their thing in, and like Silicon Valley, projecting the next dimension of the universe, right?
Gotta buy your pets online.
Yeah, you can buy your pets online. Wow. Yeah, I want a Mongolian lizard. Down in Cork, right? But what's the signal that people are missing, right? Like, because there's a lot of echo chambers out there. Like, what from the data that you're seeing at Astronomer, or talking to other executives, like what's the signal that you think that people are missing?
We touched on it a little bit, but like I think that the major model providers are about to get a lot more expensive, right? And how we respond to that in kind is going to sort of define how the next number of years are going to play out, right? I mean, we've already seen it with some of the I think it was Copilot, and I'm hoping not to besmirching Copilot by saying that they suddenly got a lot more expensive, and a lot of people are dropping them or re-rationalizing their usage. The thing that is potentially exciting to me is like the potential for self-hosting, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. The potential for like having a model that is good enough that is inside of a ring fence that a particular company of a certain size can own, right? And can say, we have an understanding of how this model works. We think it is good enough to review code inside of our enterprise. We think it's good enough to write code inside of our enterprise or to do whatever else you want it to do. But it is targeted towards that. It is smaller than the sort of big current providers. And we have the potential to possibly self-host it, right? I think we're a little while away from it in terms of potentially the economics working out. But I can see right now people are very excited about, like, oh, we can just buy a cloud subscription and get all of this wonderful capability. And we should be thinking about what happens when that costs 10, 20 times as much, right? What that opens up in terms of capability, and like, or when scarcity starts to breed clarity on this, right? Thinking about how good does a model need to be for it to be useful to you, and how much does that cost? And are there sort of smaller, more focused sort of models that aren't just reselling tokens from a large model provider piece, and that sort of democratization piece? What I'm personally excited about, that's the exec part. That's like, we should be thinking about this now. It comes to bite us. All of our products don't suddenly become unviable because they cost as much in terms of costs, right? What I'm personally excited for is like the not the post crash. There will be an adjustment. Maybe I just described the adjustment, or maybe it'll be something else, right? What I'm excited about is the category of products that will come after that. I just want to make a thing easier for humans, like, because the robots work for us fundamentally, right? Or I hope that continues to be the case, right? But I'm interested in more human-centric products, right? That are just like, I'm going to help you with a particular thing, rather than I'm going to pretend to converse with you and make you anxious, right? That to me is the, when we stop gold rushing, when we stop trying to monetize it, and when we stop, I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of that happening. But when we start seeing the set of products where it's just like, we've taken a rational look at these set of tools and this capability, and we've decided to make your life better in ways that you're happy to either pay for or tolerate. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
And the user experience complexities that we had in the SaaS era can potentially be eliminated for that human, right? Because even if you think about the IDE experience now, when it comes to code generation, right? Like, and to draw maybe apart, again, this is not trying to plug Cornell, but like, we were trying to satisfy 4 different IDEs, right? 4 different types of design, and colors that people like, and we just like made it headless. So what that means is, like, the LLM is in charge, and the LLM is in charge of surfacing that insight to the developer. So the developer then has that like one view of things, rather than like SimGrep, Snick, Kernel all throwing flags at them. It can actually like filter out the noise to signal. So I think we're going to have a renaissance in like user experience, which I think is going to be cool.
And like that, it's not just like, here's 12 signals, figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
More human-centric. It's more like, and I think introducing that degree of psychology and that degree of like, we're building things for humans here. We're not building things for frantic context switchers, right? I'm looking forward to that. I think
and to pick up on something you said, right? You said that like, humans are bad machines. So let the LLM take care of all the reasoning and traversing, and like come up then with the 1 or 2 things that you should really care about, and then use the human then to make the judgment call, right?
Exactly. Capability versus intent. Like the capability, it can move as fast as you want. The intent will always come from a human, right? And I think that's something we should push a lot of the news stories that we see through a filter of like, an LLM is going to do all of our software engineering for us. I'm like, I mean, it'll do a certain amount, but we still decide what happens. Right? We decide where the effort goes, and I think that's the part that's giving me a little hope for the next couple of years at least. Anyway,
but that's a great point to end this podcast on.
Alrighty,
good stuff. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.